Hello, this is Dr. Grande. Today's question is, can I analyze the mental health and personality characteristics that may be at work with Margaret Ruth Kidder, who is better known as Margot Kidder? Just a reminder, I'm not diagnosing anybody in this video, only speculating about what could be happening in a situation like this. If you enjoyed this video, please like it, subscribe to my channel, and consider supporting me on Patreon. I'll put the link to Patreon in the description for this video. I'll start with the background of Margot Kidder and then move to my analysis. Margot Kidder was born in Yellowknife, Canada on October 17, 1948. Her mother was Canadian and worked as a history teacher, and her father was American and made a living as an engineer and explosives expert. Kidder would later come to believe that she had bipolar disorder starting when she was young, even though she wouldn't be diagnosed with it until she was an adult. At age 14, Kidder attempted to bring an end to her own life using codeine. Kidder's family moved around quite a bit because of her father's work. Kidder went to many different schools. She graduated from high school in Toronto in 1966. She went to college in Vancouver, but only stayed for 1 year. She started working as a model after returning to Toronto and would soon start working as an actress. Her movie debut was in 1968. She also appeared on several television shows, but she really didn't garner too much attention at first. She moved to Los Angeles and was cast in a movie that was filmed in Ireland. She moved to New York City to study acting for a while, and then went back to California to continue working as an actress. Kidder married in 1976. The marriage ended in 1977. The couple would have one child. She would later say that her self-esteem had decreased during her marriage. She was having difficulty maintaining her work as an actress. In 1977, she auditioned for the role of Lois Lane in the film Superman the Movie. The movie would be released during the Christmas season of 1978 and would catapult Kidder to fame. In 1979, she appeared in The Amityville Horror. It did well financially, but her performance did not attract much positive attention. Kidder would marry the actor John Hurd in August 1979. They made it an entire 6 days before separating. It was like they were trying to create a new fad, a honeymoon divorce. I guess they looked at other short-term celebrity marriages and thought, we can do better. Margot Kidder would star in Superman 2 in 1980, so the original Superman and Superman 2, both very good movies. She would go on to be featured in several other movies over the next few years, including Heartaches in 1991, Some Kind of Hero in 1982, and Superman 3 in 1983. She had only 12 lines in that movie. She would marry a film director in 1983. They divorced in 1984. Using her previous marriage as a standard, that marriage probably felt like an eternity. It appears as though in 1985, she was becoming unhappy with acting. She would say that she was in a weird frame of mind, and she knew that acting was not going to be enough for her for the rest of her life. Kidder was in Superman 4, The Quest for Peace in 1987, the last time she would play Lois Lane. This movie was more effective than Kryptonite in killing off Superman. In December of 1990, Margot Kidder was acting for an episode of the Nancy Drew and Daughter television series when she was in an automobile accident and sustained a spinal injury that left her partially paralyzed. The accident did not occur on set, therefore she was unable to collect anything from the production company's insurance. She was fired from the show. Her use of drugs and alcohol increased. She was out of work for 2 years. She would rack up $800,000 in debt and eventually go bankrupt. When she returned to work, she had mostly small roles. She was diagnosed with bipolar disorder in 1988, but she did not believe the diagnosis was accurate and would not take medication. In 1996, Kidder traveled to Los Angeles and had a manic episode that would become well publicized. She was taken to the hospital at the end of the episode and would accept her diagnosis of bipolar disorder. I'll cover this manic episode in more detail in the analysis. She went back to acting, once again in relatively small roles, but the critics liked her performances. She became a United States citizen in 2005 and lived in Montana. She would become well known to law enforcement there for her struggles with drug and alcohol use. She was active in liberal politics and considers herself an activist, even going so far as being arrested during a protest against the Keystone Pipeline. Kidder continued to act on different television shows and in the movies for the next several years. This brings us to May 13, 2018, in Livingston, Montana. A friend of Margot Kidder, who helped her with house cleaning, would find her unresponsive in her home. It was later reported that her death was the result of a self-inflicted drug and alcohol overdose. Margot Kidder was 69 years old. Now moving to my analysis. I will start with Margot Kidder's potential personality profile. Kidder was high in openness to experience. She was creative, liberal, intellectually curious, and adventurous. She appeared to be low in conscientiousness, like being reckless, but I think her bipolar disorder symptoms may have been responsible for at least some of that impulsivity. Kidder did have a fantastic work ethic, but overall, her level of conscientiousness was probably lower than average. Kidder's level of extroversion was high. She was outgoing, charismatic, talkative, and sensation-seeking. Her level of agreeableness was probably a little bit below average. She was described as confrontational, distrusting, and of course, she was an activist. But there were reports that she was tender, modest, and straightforward as well. But again, I think the overall level would be low. As far as her level of neuroticism, it was probably high. She was depressed, anxious, vulnerable, angry, and had difficulty resisting temptation. Looking at her mental health, as I mentioned, she was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. She started seeing mental health professionals at age 21, but did not always take their advice. Bipolar disorder is characterized by episodic mania and depression. So a period of time when somebody feels euphoric and impulsive, the mania, and a period of time when somebody feels down and worthless, depression. Usually, as someone with bipolar disorder grows older, the number of manic episodes decrease and the number of depressive episodes increase. Technically, only mania is required for a diagnosis of bipolar 1, but usually, again, we do see both mania and depression. Many people with bipolar disorder also have psychosis, which tends to manifest at the extremes of an episode. So when somebody's extremely manic, they can become psychotic, and when they're extremely depressed, they can become psychotic. Even though both mania and depression are devastating, mania stands out a lot more. Other people tend to notice that behavior more so than depression. Kidder had a number of manic episodes in her life, but there's one in particular I mentioned before, which has been well documented and was quite public. I will go through it in some detail here because it really does illustrate the destructive power of mania. In 1996, Kidder flew to Los Angeles to visit a technology company that she hoped could retrieve her autobiography from her laptop. She had been working on it for 3 years, but the computer that she owned became infected with a virus and destroyed the document. The company was unable to recover the data. This may have contributed to the onset of the manic episode that would occur next. On April 20, Kidder arrived at Los Angeles Airport. She was looking to board her flight to Phoenix, except her flight was scheduled for April 21. She wandered around the airport for hours talking to travelers and security guards. She approached a reporter and his cameraman who just flew in from Atlanta. After introducing herself as Margot Kidder, she asked if she could hang out with them. She went on to tell them that her ex-husband had hired several men to kill her. She added that he made O.J. Simpson look like Alan Alda. It's impressive she could still generate this analogy when under so much stress. The reporter believed her at first, but when she pointed out one of the men who had been following her, the reporter noticed that that man had been on the flight with him. The reporter knew something was not quite right. Kidder asked to switch jackets with him because she believed hers was bugged. She asked for money, and then she wanted the men to call her a taxi. At 4:30 a.m., she left the airport in a taxi, but the taxi driver kicked her out of the cab because she couldn't pay the fare. For the next 3 days, she wandered on foot. She walked for miles. She switched clothes with a homeless individual, probably due to paranoia. So again, she was worried that her clothes were bugged, and she was worried that people would find her. She approached 3 people and asked for a cigarette. They ended up taking her to Glendale because they believed she was homeless. After finding out that the shelters there were full, they paid for a motel room for Kidder. This was 11 p.m. on Monday. She stayed there until Tuesday morning, cutting her hair with scissors she borrowed from the front desk. After walking the streets of Glendale most of the day Tuesday, she was located at 6 p.m. by a homeowner who found her hiding in a bush in a backyard. After the homeowner called the police, officers arrived and confronted her. She would not talk to them, and they believed she was paranoid. They noticed that the caps were broken off of her teeth. She would later say that someone attacked her. They took her to a mental health treatment facility. She was transferred to a private clinic not long after. As I mentioned before, after this episode, Kidder accepted her diagnosis of bipolar disorder. Margot Kidder would describe her mood swings as being capable of knocking over a building. She dealt with bipolar disorder in a few different ways. She hid the disorder from other people. She thought having a child might cure the disorder. And she self-medicated with drugs and alcohol. This is an extremely common approach. Sometimes when she was manic, she would take stimulants, which would only make the manic symptoms worse. She would write for up to 12 hours a day. She had a lot of ideas when she was manic. This is also quite common. At the time of her death, she had hundreds of notebooks in her house containing her thoughts. Toward the end of her life, Kidder had discussed death a few times. On one occasion, she talked about how she wanted to be pushed out on a piece of ice and freeze in the ocean. On another occasion, she said that after her death, she wanted her body to be taken to the mountains so that wolves and bears could eat it. During the time leading up to her death, Kidder had lost a number of people close to her. For example, her friend Carrie Fisher in December of 2016, her ex-husband John Hurd in July of 2017, and a close friend just weeks before she died. Kidder was probably thinking about death even more because of those losses. Even though her agent initially reported that Kidder died peacefully in her sleep, this was not true. The police would describe the scene of her death as unspeakable. It was reported that she did not die quickly. There was nothing poetic about her death. It wasn't like she consumed drugs and alcohol and faded off into the night peacefully. I can understand why the agent would try to say she died peacefully, but that misinformation disrespects the struggle that Margot Kidder endured. Her life and death should encourage people to honestly face the destructive power of major mood disorders like bipolar disorder. Her life was one that directs people to confront mental health challenges head-on, not to avoid them or to hope that they'll just go away, not to attempt to reframe the situation and pretend that everything's all right. Margot Kidder was a good actress with bad mental health problems. She worked hard. She took any role. She was dedicated to her craft. But the combined effect of the stress that she was under, her experiences, and her symptoms was devastating. With treatment compliance and abstaining from substance use, her situation could have turned out differently. I think her experiences should encourage people to keep pursuing recovery. I think Margot Kidder's story is a tale of courage, someone standing up against a disorder, but it is also a story about how pernicious symptoms can be, how they can push a person to use substances, which in turn makes recovery even more challenging. Those are my thoughts on the life and death of Margot Kidder. Please put any opinions and thoughts in the comment section. They always generate an interesting dialogue. As always, I hope you found my analysis of this topic to be interesting. Thanks for watching.